The SD Ruby podcast is brought to you by New Relic.
Before we get started, I just want to say a little bit about myself. Assuming you want to use this. Yeah. So I used to live here in San Diego, and a couple of years ago I went to LA RubyConf, and I met Bjorn Freeman Benson, who's at the time the director of engineering for New Relic. And I was really interested in the type of a team he was building. And so I packed up, I left the sun, and I went up to Portland, Oregon to see what this thing he was constructing was. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about tonight. This follows my proud tradition of coming to SD Ruby and not talking about Ruby. I'm going to give a talk here that not only is not about Ruby, but isn't actually that technical, and doesn't have to do even with engineering. It has to do with building your career and what are the different things, and with building a team, with getting stuff done. And these are things that will work equally well in any field where you have a division between the people managers whose job it is to make sure that engineers or scientists or whatever it is do the work, and then workers, whether those people are web developers or COBOL programmers or lab scientists, somebody who has a lot of technical expertise but isn't a manager. So it happens to a lot of people. It happened to me. I knew it was going to happen to me. I had gone kind of looking for it. I started as an individual contributor, and I became a manager. And so that's what I'm going to talk to you about tonight. And if that sounds horrible, you can throw stuff at me. It'll be good fun. On the mailing list, I put out a request for votes on topics, and got actually a pretty even distribution between people who were interested in the scaling talk and people who were interested in the management talk. So, scaling people, I'm sorry, but as appeasement, I'm going to give a 3-minute revelation of all of our engineering secrets, as promised on the New Relic Twitter feed. And it turns out they're the same things that you'll also hear in the management talk, because the secrets to how we do business are the same across both sides. We have this data collection network. We bring in, we're posts in once a minute from every agent out there running on a language agent, what we call them, the monitored application. So if you have a Ruby on Rails application, there's an agent that lives inside of it for New Relic that posts back performance data to us. And we have the same thing for Java and PHP, and we have one for OS statistics, all these different things. It doesn't actually matter exactly what that is for the purposes of this discussion. It adds up to be about 320,000 requests coming in every minute. Then we added a new product in the spring that instruments people's web browsers. And so that means that not just are our customers' servers talking to our network, but now our customers' customers are talking to our network. So if we instrument Groupon, then every person who goes to the Groupon website, their browser is talking back to our network. So we knew ahead of time this was going to be a big scalability challenge, and we didn't know exactly how big it was going to be. So the way we approached that problem is we started with what we did know. We knew how to build the main collector network. And we said, well, this problem should actually be simpler. The data coming in from a web browser is smaller than our collector network data. So what do we need? At the time, I was involved with operational planning, and I looked at it, I said, I don't even want to see this problem. We're talking about billions of requests coming into the network. It's going to be a total disaster. Very smart people I was working with said, why would you think it's going to be a disaster? What have we done in the past that makes you believe this? I couldn't come up with anything. So instead of building out a totally new system, we shrunk what we had. We said, build the collector again, build it smaller. Start with one customer in beta. Get them running. Adjust. Measure the data. We make application performance monitoring so we can measure our performance data. Go back. And so over the course of several months, we iterated through the early versions. We launched with a product that would not today hold the load. But at launch, it held the load. And over the course of the summer, as we grew and grew and grew, we never went back and said, well, throw the whole architecture out, start again from scratch, we need push this out into the cloud, we need to do this, we need to do that. Every time we came up with an idea like, well, I think it would be really great to move the whole thing to EC2, you stop and you say, why? What are you trying to accomplish? What's the purpose? Run an experiment, figure out how you do it. Be very conservative. Rely on the engineers that you have. People have expertise. Many of our people have expertise going back decades now in computers, many years on the web. Trust them. Somebody who knows how to write a Java server, and they say to you, oh, I think my Java server can handle 750,000 requests a minute on one box. Trust them. You hired this guy to be smart. Maybe he's smart. And it turns out he is. And that's what we do. We have one active machine, and then we have an idle standby. And it handles 750,000 requests every minute into a single Java process running on a single machine. And the secret of everything we do in scalability is keep it simple, be very conservative, don't make changes without a reason. And so we'll get over now into the management side of the talk, now that you can all run out and start your own high-scale companies. When you do so, some of you are going to have to be managers. Some people will get to be the engineers, some of the people are going to have to be in charge of them. Maybe you're at that cusp in your career right now where people are talking about it, or you've recently jumped over, or you just look at other people and say, man, that guy looks miserable. When we talk about managers, there are a couple of things we talk about as a first-line manager. So this is famously the worst position in engineering. You are not an executive, you're not a director, you have just been promoted up to the very first year. You have 3 job responsibilities, essentially. You have to still do some engineering work because you probably have projects you're in the middle of. You don't get the complete free pass. You have to do project management, which means ensuring the schedules are met. Project management is the art of delivering features on time. And there's a lot that's written about that, and people talk about, we have agile planning methodologies, and we have a lot of techniques that we've learned over the years to help us do project management. The third one is, I believe, the most important, and that is you also need to be a people manager. You are, given the charge of however many people are in your group. Say you have a team with 3 people on it. It's your responsibility now to make sure that those people are doing the best work that they can. It doesn't do the company or your department, this whole organization, any better if you get promoted and then those guys go off the rails. You need these people to do their best work. And the way to do that is surprisingly simple, much as the way that we do our scalability is surprisingly simple. Everything I put up on these screens tonight, you're going to look at it and say it's overly simple. But it's actually very hard to do. They're high-minded concepts. They take a lot of time. Listen, care about people. This is the hardest thing for any manager. Again, it sounds very easy. You think, well, I'm a nice guy, I care about people. But when you sit down at your desk, this is what you should be doing. You're not filling out reports. I'm not making Gantt charts. I'm not ordering bugs. I'm sitting down and wondering, the people that make up my group, are they where they need to be? Are they happy? Are they doing the things they want to do? And not just in a, oh, here's their career chart, this guy should be doing more bug fixes and I have to talk to him about that. But honestly, a deep empathy for these people. And this takes a lot of time. You have to study people. You have to watch for the nonverbal cues. You have to watch for things that happen over to the side. Really keep a close eye on what people are not officially telling you. When I started as a manager, this was hard for me. I had a person on my team. I'd never worked with him before. We'd done a little bit of stuff in the few months immediately beforehand, but that was the first time for me that I was directly responsible for his performance. And it finally occurred to me that this isn't the first time I've managed. I just had a different name for it. It used to be called, it's you look out for your friends. It's friendship, essentially. It's a kind of weird one-way friendship because you don't need to be friends with your employees, but you need to treat them like you would a friend. You need to see down the road, where is this person going? What can I do to clear obstacles for them? Are they heading in the right place in this organization, or are they moving towards a position they're going to hate? Are they getting frustrated by daily tasks? Are they overwhelmed? Do they need to take a break, take some vacation? This type of empathy is what drives everything else in people management. It's really getting out there. You also have to respect people. I talked about you've hired smart people. You need to respect them as smart people. If you give somebody an order, you say, this is what you're going to do. This is the top item on your priority. Forget whatever else you were thinking of. Do this. You've changed the relationship. Now you're in the Army. Now you're giving orders. And the person will always come back to you and look for, last time he stopped me from doing what I was going to do before. Why bother thinking on my own? Come back and say, give me my next order. And now you've ruined all of this efficiency. There's no reason to hire a good person if you have to tell them what to do every day. You've hired them for their judgment. The other place that you have to spend a lot of time, a lot of thought, is teamwork. You'll see this teaminess up on a lot of screens if you ever go to a management talk or you read a book. Well, what the hell does it mean? Everybody wants teamwork. We're all told all the time, oh yes, work as a team. The way you create teamwork is you reward people for doing the right things, not for doing the wrong things. A great counterpoint came to me from a friend of the family in the company who worked at Microsoft. And they said, we're graded on these sections, everybody gets their rankings. So, I was going to help this other guy with a project, and then I realized I would be spending my time improving his ranking. And the further his ranking goes up, the more my ranking goes down. This is an incentive system that discourages teamwork. You want people to work not only on their own projects, but keep the vision for everybody else. If I'm an engineer and one of the people on my team is falling down on the job, I want to be concerned about it. I don't want to just be like, he's doing a bad job on that project, but I don't know why. Maybe he's not getting enough sleep. He has a new kid. You want everybody to pitch in, and this isn't just in your small team. This is across the whole organization. In New Relic, we do a lot of things to encourage this. We set goals that are about the performance of the entire engineering team, not about the performance of one group or another group within the team. And this came in very handy for my own projects. In the fall, I was in charge of a launch that we were doing at Cloud Expo. It was a hard date. There's no fudging the launch. We get closer and closer to the launch. I'm starting to work 18 hours a day. I'm just throwing everything I've got at this project. And one of the other managers said, what can I do for you? Not just can I put engineers on your team, but can I take over your project management duties? Can I do things like really completely wrecking her own schedule for her projects because the project that I was working on was a higher priority for the business. And when we were done, we had a successful launch. And that's a win for everybody. That's not just a win for me. That's a win for her also, even though it wasn't officially on her list. So you can do this at a big level in a company. You can do this at a small level in a team. If you have only 2 people, don't set goals that pits one against the other. Everybody's naturally competitive. Set a goal that has the team delivering. A part of that is that as a manager, you should be invisible. It's not your job to get up there every day and be the face of a team. You don't say, I am doing this, my team, it's very kind of grabbing this. You don't want to be seen at all. You want your effect to be felt, but not directly heard. If you go into your boss and he says, great work on delivering, the widget 5.x. Go right back and say, thank you, it was, so-and-so on my team, Rupert, did an amazing job on widget 5.x. You're not there to grab the glory. You're there to celebrate the successes of the people in your group. And as a result, your boss will think, not only did you do a good job on this, but you did a good job in having good people in your team. It will not come back to bite you. I'm not, there must be some bad companies out there somewhere. But I'm practically willing to give you a guarantee. If you celebrate the successes of the people who you are there to help as a manager, then it will reflect well on you. This also means, not doing what I'm doing in many cases, not standing up in front of the room, but asking people in your team to stand up in front of the room. Do everything you can to make it about the members of the team and not about yourself. If you're into management because you like to hobnob with the executives and you just want to go out and have a good time and attend conferences, find another field. The engineering management is not about that. I said the way that this ties in with our scalability is experiment. Everything we do as a company is based on the idea that you can measure success. We can measure a website in response time. We can measure the scalability of a system in throughput. How do you measure the output of your team? How do you measure the improvement of an engineer? Set goals, make them concrete, make them reasonably long-term so that you know if it's really working. Good concrete one. We talked about our lead designer, who I'm going to use as a lot of examples here. Our goals for our design were that he become more visible within the company to take on this leadership role. How do you measure visibility in a company? You ask the executives. You go up the chain and say, hey, did you talk to so-and-so about this project? Or, when you had this idea, who did you ask? Query, science, it takes feedback. And sometimes experiments don't work. If they always work, they wouldn't be experiments. But people are normally, they'll give you the good faith as long as they know if something isn't working, you will kill it off. You're not there to just kind of trick them with an experiment. You really go out, read the data, come back, think of it again. So, given these kind of broad points, care about your people, reward good behavior, essentially. The teamwork one is really about setting up incentives for people. Be experimental, be invisible. How do you do things that are hard if you don't know how to do them? If you were asked to start working in a new programming language or a new programming concept, a totally different branch you've never worked in before, how do you get started? You find somebody who knows how to do it. Many people who start into management don't do this relatively simple step. They look out in their company, the people they know best are the team they've just recently been working with. You've been an engineer on the web team, now you've been put in charge of the web team. The people you're closest to are the web team. The web team doesn't know how to manage, they're not managers. They know maybe the same things you do. Otherwise, one of the other people on the team would probably be managing you. You have to go out and find people who know how to do this. Otherwise, you're left with nothing but gut instincts. They're going to be wrong. In management, you don't even have a compiler like a runtimer. You just set that stuff out there, and you only find out maybe 6 months down the road whether you were wrong. You want to be right. Inside of your company, if it's a medium or a large company, there'll be other managers, other frontline managers. Really get to know them. Build a team within the company of managers. These are people you can go to and say, this guy's just really, pissing me off. He's not doing his work. How do I go in and tell him that without making him want to quit? Because he's a valuable employee when he's doing the right thing. And you could just take a guess, or you can ask somebody who has some experience. If you're in a small company, or if you're in a company where this is, you feel impolitic or difficult in some way, reach outside your department, reach outside your company. You have to have colleagues, you have to have peers, otherwise the stress is going to kill you. You're going to make a lot of simple mistakes. An example I was given when I was pulling up these slides was our vice president of marketing. Here's a guy, he's the head of our marketing org. We don't have anybody else in marketing that he can go to. So he has marketing people outside the company that he talks to. I think that's a great way to solve this problem. You have to have somebody that you feel you can speak with confidentially, and those people can be in any role as long as they have some experience to go to. That's really it. You know, there's not a lot of mystery here. I said that it's simple concepts, they're hard to apply. You need to use the same techniques that you would use as an engineer. You need to measure your success. You need to be willing to change your approach. You know, think of it agilely. You know, we're going to try this. If it doesn't work, we're going to try something else. If you just start this process by thinking, well, I'm a good engineer, I'll be a good manager. I don't need to hear criticism from people. I don't need to learn. You're not going to be a good manager. You know, you can only get there by doing the same type of self-evaluation and self-improvement that you would for any difficult field. Now, Patrick has told me that we are not only in under time on my talk, but there is not a overflowing abutment of other talks. So I will be a little bit rude and stand up here and do Q&A on either the scalability portion or on the management portion. I know that everybody has kind of their own concerns on this material, and so I may not have done a good job covering. So, ready for questions? Yes?
Who'd you learn from?
So the question was, who did I learn from? I learned from our director of engineering, Bjorn, who learned over a course of I won't say long because that would embarrass his age, but a at least moderately long career in doing management. And most importantly, I learned from the other managers. When I became a manager, we had 3 other frontline managers who were all in a little bit, forward of me career-wise, but very similar. Even though the other people in our company, it's the M team, which is, I believe, a concept from the 5 dysfunctions of a team. It's a very good book on management, which is a terrible thing for me to even try and say. But working together, we were able to solve problems in our management styles, even though we started with no knowledge. We had mentorship from above, but the core we formed so my main team became the M team. These were the people I went to when I had a problem. And that mechanism allowed us to grow tremendously as managers. Even if you work at a company that does not have a good management culture, go out and form that team, find other interested people, and you'll be amazed what you can learn.
What's your take on engineers who are maxing out where they can be as an engineer and the only next move up is management? So they're not necessarily interested in management.
Right. It's a very good question. It's about, in many companies, you get very senior engineers, and the only place to go up in your career is management, and they're not interested in being management. And in my belief, they shouldn't be. Management is a very different set of duties, a very different set of skills. It has a little bit of science in common with engineering, and obviously smart people can learn many skills. But one should never assume that management is not the next thing up from engineers. I have engineers who work on the team that I manage who are senior to me. And I think that should be the norm. And in many companies it's not. But to me, that makes the most sense. I'm working up the chain doing management tasks. They're working up the chain doing engineering tasks. This is not a hierarchical relationship in terms of seniority, only in terms of the organization of a company.
What do you hope to get from the browser that you don't get from the inside of the web app?
So, jumping back to the new Relic product, this is about our browser monitoring. The instrumenting the JavaScript in the browser tells us how long it actually takes a page to load, for the DOM to be processed, and for things to be displayed out on the screen. what we found is that many applications, people have been focused for so long on the application server performance. You say, man, my server turns pages around in 200 milliseconds. You know, I'm golden. A couple of bad pieces of JavaScript, some shoddy asset pipeline, and your pages can be rendering in 10 or 12 or 14 seconds. We've had some customers with much worse than that, who I won't name names. Patrick?
What's your typical team size?
I'm a big believer in the legendary Apple two pizza teams. Sorry, Patrick's question is, what's the typical team size? I personally, I'm a really kind of low-ranking manager, very new to this. I can't manage a very large team. It would be ridiculous to ask me to do so and expect success. So my team is very small. Our more accomplished managers have teams that are upwards of half a dozen people. But by the time you're getting up into 7 or 8 people, we really start thinking about looking at the engineers within that team, seeing if any of them are interested in making the jump into management. If none of them are, then maybe recruiting externally. We've done some of both. And they honestly both work out fairly well for us. Engineers are initially suspicious of outside people coming in to manage them. I think that's fair for anybody who works in a field where you have a lot of experience doing what you do. But if you can demonstrate value to somebody and show them that you're not there to push them around, but you're there to actually help them be happier and more effective at their job, then that's worked well for us, kind of bringing people in. On the flip side, promoting from within, we have to separate people who believe they need to become managers to move their career forwards from people who are interested in the skills of management and the people managing those things. So that's the hard part about internal promotion, but generally speaking, it's around half a dozen people max.
You mentioned earlier people coming from engineering into management are often also doing a bunch of engineering tasks. How have you found that trade-off works over time, especially if you're building out a new team? How much time does each additional person you're managing take away or start to take, and how much time do you have left for engineering?
So the question is, if you started as a contributor, now you've become a contributor and a manager, how does this balance of time shift between doing all engineering when you've started and slowly whittling down to doing all management? That's a tricky one. What we've found within our own company is that so many of the demands of management, once you get past the people management, and we have a very hands-on system for people management. We manage much smaller groups and much more intensively because we really are interested in this career development aspect. And then you add the project management, and then you add in, kind of these miscellaneous meetings you could go to. Maybe you could go talk at San Diego Ruby. You starve out your engineering queue very quickly. You just kind of stop doing engineering because you feel all of a sudden that people are coming to you. People will really get in your face if you don't, take care of your engineers, but it's not maybe the same way if your project is running late. So for us, it's a constant battle to try and claw back some of that engineering time. Because as in many companies, all of the people who are engineering managers at our company were at one time very productive engineers. We'd love to have their time back doing that. We've just decided to use it mostly some other way. So for me, I'm able to work about 2 days a week on engineering tasks, and I have a team of 3 engineers who I'm taking care of. So that's where I am. Other managers do better. I don't know if anybody in our company does worse than me, but I'm the newest.
How do you manage your schedule or your time so that the focused attention you need for 2 or 3 hours of coding doesn't get interrupted by some spontaneous meeting, some distracting email, some IM, all those things that go along with management?
So the question is, how do you block your time out so you still get focus time for engineering? And I would add to that I've found I often need focus time for people management also. I can do scheduling, I can push stories around Jira or something like that with 15 spare minutes. But if I want to really stop and think, what is the place I want this team to be in a year and a half? I need real focus time the same way I would for an engineering task. And engineering tasks, not just for myself, but for the people who work on this team, those take a lot of time for creative solutions. So what we've done is tried to concentrate our distractions into groups. If I had an afternoon that has one meeting in the middle of the afternoon, that'll ruin the whole afternoon. So be conscious of that when you're thinking about scheduling a meeting with somebody. Look at their schedules. Don't put a meeting out in the middle of open space saying there's plenty of time on your Thursday afternoon. Try and get it right up next to another meeting earlier in the day so that they can have these full times. And for myself, what I've done is block out either all afternoons on certain days or sometimes a whole day where I'm saying, today I'm just all afternoon I'm going to go off into another room in our office where people don't know where to find me, turn off IM, turn off my email, and just do engineering or just work on somebody's review or do something that does require that focus time and not be consumed by the interruptions.
Nick, how do you, or do you, use Ruby on Rails at New Relic? You mentioned Java process in your intro to scaling.
So, a new Relic question. How do we use Ruby on Rails? When you log in, we started entirely in the Ruby community. Our very first language agent was Ruby. Our collectors used to actually be written in Ruby. And our site is still Ruby. So when you go to rpm.newrelic.com, once you've logged into our site, that is a Rails app. It does about 6,000 requests a minute. It's 2 app servers. We run Mongrel. We run Rails 2.3. We run Ruby 1.8.7, the Ruby Enterprise Edition. If I didn't get the point across clearly before, the key we found for our scalability is to be conservative. We want to change all of those things. We want to be on Rails 3.1. We want to be on Ruby 1.9. We want to be on Unicorn or something. Mongrel is a little bit embarrassing in this day and age. It doesn't even run on 1.9 anyway. But all of these things need a reason to fix them, and at least a reason to schedule them. So we're kind of pushing forward on those, but right now what you see is still driven by relatively old technology.
I wonder if you have any tips or thoughts on either as a senior person or as a manager working with a bad programmer?
This one comes up a lot. So the question is, well, that's all fine and dandy, but what if you have someone who's actually bad? Having a troubled employee is the biggest source of stress anywhere I've ever worked. Somebody who is either underperforming, they're just, they're out of their depth in some way, or maybe they just seem to stop caring, they cause a toxic environment. And this can consume not just your time, but your peers' time because they care about you, your bosses. You can have this whole hierarchy mobilized to try and deal with somebody. And it really depends on the severity of the case. There are people who are just, they've built up some anger about something. And in that case, you just need to find out what it is. It comes down to really understanding, maybe they're pretty cross about the fact that, you switched the jelly beans out for trail mix, Maybe somebody did that to them at a previous company and the next thing that happened was they got fired. So, hear them out, try and get these people to talk and find out. But maybe it's not the right place for them. And I'm a bad person to ask about this because I'm actually kind of ruthless. I believe that you are happiest when you are doing good work, and that everybody in your group, all of these people came to the company because they wanted to do good work. Nobody came because they wanted to just get a paycheck and put their feet up. People honestly want to do a good job. If somebody is not doing a good job, work with them, try and figure it out, but sometimes the best solution is just to, agree to disagree, and both parties should, move on. They will be happier at another position, and you'll be happier not spending your time on your worst employees instead of your best employees. But it takes some time. You really need to plumb the situation, try and find out why. Maybe it's just a personality issue, it's a culture clash, maybe it's a knowledge thing, or maybe it's something really easily fixable. We've seen both. I'm Obviously, I'm not going into any detail, so I don't want to give any hints to people who I know will watch this. But you really don't know until you talk to somebody and you think hard about what it is that causes their behavior.
Any thoughts on hiring good engineers?
The question about hiring, how do you avoid that problem in the first place? By hiring the best engineers. Hiring is really hard. I have no good answer. The best thing to do is to hire people that somebody else has worked with already within your company. That really does wonders for separating out the unknowns. Obviously, that pipeline runs out. You have to start going forwards. If you're Google, you can make people like jog a whole Olympics or whatever to get a job at your company, or 37 Signals people will come in and they'll work for however long as a trial employee. We're neither of those companies. When people start with us, they expect to have a job. What we do is we go out and we talk to somebody informally first. Go out to a coffee shop, go out, have a beer with somebody, get to know somebody a little bit, then maybe bring them by the office, and then embark on an interview. Because all too often, what happens is, once you've committed to an interview, then unless they really fall down on the job technically, they'll come on through. And some of our best people have presented themselves poorly in an interview situation, but once you get to know somebody, you know whether they're nervous or whether they're actually uncommunicative. So try and build a personal relationship with people before you bring them in for the kind of all-day interview.
Scaling question, when you were trying to build up the overall performance capabilities, what barriers did you run into that prevent you from just simply going wide?
When we were building our scalability question about what were the barriers that we hit as we went up. So we first started for our browser monitoring, we call that system the Beacon, and we deployed it to EC2 because maybe other people who were strong-armed by me, thought that amount of traffic shouldn't come anywhere near our network, it's just too crazy. So we put it out in the cloud, and we noticed that the unpredictable latency of EC2 really capped us out, and that virtualization is much more expensive than you think. So we tuned and we adjusted various things, and we could never get past 100,000 requests a minute on the largest thing EC2 would sell us. We brought it back in-house, put it on a $5,000 piece of hardware from Dell, and immediately tripled that. The cloud is not free. You have traded a lot of performance in order to receive a manageability interface. So that was one that really jumps to mind. Another one which, is the HTTP sessions. Have an HTTP specialist in your network, essentially. For us, we have a pair of load balancers. They're from F5. And they deal with all of the external traffic, even this beacon traffic, and then make short requests on the inside of our network. And you can use a lot of different stuff for this. You can do this with Nginx. You can do this with HA proxy. There's a number of ways to approach this problem. But you have to do this. You have to have something in your network whose job it is to take care of all the weirdness of the internet. And then once you get into the back end, everything should be smooth, predictable, perfect gigabit network, so that you know if you build a timing loop that it's just going to run like a Swiss clock. It has to be everything perfect in the back end. So control the chaos, I guess. Any other questions? Yeah?
Have you ever had to manage employees that were remote from where you're located?
Yes, I do that now, actually. Remote employees is the question. Remote employees require extra care. I'm going to put that out there. If you have someone who you're considering either hiring remote or kind of working with remotely, make sure these people are a cut above. That's the easiest thing you can do. Find people who have either done solo companies, done freelance work, remote at other shops. Somebody who knows the tools of the trade. Then be conscious of the way that you communicate with people. If I walk down the hallway and I see that somebody is just looking pissed off today, I say, oh man, that guy looks like he's having a bad day. I can just know that. It's automatic nonverbal, instinctive level humanity that I get. If that employee were on the other end of, the world, like some of our employees are, you don't have that. If you don't reach out on on Skype, make it as real as possible, force yourself to talk to these people, whether you think you have something to talk about or not, you'll never be able to measure these things. You'll just be trying to read between the lines on an email that maybe didn't even get sent out until a week later. So you have to be very conscious about making an effort to contact remote employees, reading their temperature remotely, and keeping them in the loop for information that you might not even realize is important. People talk around the office about stuff. So we have this mix of remote and local employees, and the remote employees will just feel adrift unless you specifically call them up and you say, hey, great news, Bob over, whatever, in the COBOL group, had this awesome success. And they'll say, hey, that's cool, I like Bob. Build that relationship.
Has being a manager changed the way you deal with your manager?
Has being a manager changed the way I deal with my manager? I would say, in my case, it's almost in the inverse. Dealing with my manager has made me into a manager. Before working at New Relic, I had almost negative interest in management. I didn't want to do it. It was just like, well, I want to just move up the engineering side, keep me out of all this nonsense. And I realized once I came to New Relic, once I started working with the management team that we have there, that it can be better than that. It can be really interesting work. And that I had just never experienced it before because all of my managers in the past were from everything I learned about management, I learned from watching movies, like get up there and yell at people like, oh, people, it's crunch time, too much Glengarry Glen Ross, whatever. People just don't, good intentions, they don't have a good model to draw from. And so that had always been management to me. And once I started being managed actively by a manager who was concerned about me as an engineer and as a person, then I said, hey, I like people, I could do this. And it has changed the way I parent.
Do you finally get to do cherry pick projects now that you're a manager, or do you typically end up, just kind of facilitating everybody else and kind of take the random things off of them so they can focus?
So the question is, what are the engineering projects I get to do? Do I get to kind of pick, the little juicy ones, or am I, primarily engineering things that fall through the cracks or just need to be done to get the rest of the team moving? I'm in a transitional step in the company. The group that I work in handles new projects. So I have, in addition to management responsibility, I have engineering responsibility for a project that's coming out this spring. And everyone else on the team has responsibility for their own projects that are coming out at some point in the future. So I'm on a very traditional engineering role in addition to being a manager. The more senior managers who have more people in their groups fall more into the latter. You can pick a project as long as it's the type of project you can knock out in a couple of afternoons. And so it's the engineering work that they do flows a lot from their interactions with the team. One of the managers built a system for watching the different support tickets that came in and graphing that up in a dashboard. That was a great piece of quick work that had an immediate result in how we worked across our teams. Because we could all of a sudden see these support ticket loads for teams that weren't our own, you knew, oh my goodness, those guys over there really need help today. Maybe I'll walk over there and see what I can do to get off their plate. So that type of facilitating engineering is, I believe, the kind of down the road, but it's not where I am currently.
What tools do you guys use to manage your development process? Do you use what ticketing systems, chat program, what are you guys using to kind of collaborate?
So the question is, what tools do we use for collaboration, managing the development process? I almost hate to tell you because I'm really just not happy with the tools.
Okay, which tools?
Yeah.
Can you tell me what tools you would rather switch to?
Well, I'll talk about it a little bit for people who are interested in this topic. So we used to use Pivotal Tracker for everything, and it is a fantastic story tracking system, and it's very good for this workflow prioritization. When I worked on a project that had Pivotal Tracker, I knew that every morning I could just go in, pull stories off the kind of top 10, somewhere on this top screen are important stories, pull them down, knock them out, move them through the flow. But it really started to break down as we moved into more and more projects, wider and wider. So then we switched to Jira. And Jira allowed us to track our release versions much more closely. So in Pivotal, you create all these markers and you've got one that's jungling around. Our website is released twice a week. Every Tuesday and Thursday, we deploy a new version of our site. So in Tracker, that was chewing up all of our time managing what was and was not in the release. Jira made that easy, but it makes a lot of other things hard. I'm actually kind of in between tools right now. There's a pad of paper there and a pen, which is my tracking system that I use for most work. And that has a list of the important projects and a little bit of the progress on them. And because I work in a very small team where each engineer has primary responsibility for a project, I don't actually need to coordinate that much. My project management duties are relatively light. Had enough?
Your o'clock.
Thanks, Nick.
It's the final word. If you like what you heard and you can't make it happen where you work, maybe you can come somewhere where you can. We're hiring just about every type of person you've ever heard of. It's a wonderful place to work. It's the best company I've ever worked at. And I would love to talk to you about it over a beverage or at LA RubyConf, where I'll also be out this weekend.